everybody? So we've got a fun review today as we're finally talking about Invincible Season 2, Part 2. Now, I love this series. Part 1 of the show was amazing, and the story was building up so much great momentum with that cliffhanger ending with Mark and Omni-Man, only to then be hit with a 4-month break in between Part 1 and Part 2, which I personally was not a big fan of. But still, nonetheless, I am excited to be back talking about this show on the channel. And my main hope really was that they would just continue to build upon that momentum now that we're back with the last 4 episodes of Season 2. Though it does take a little bit to get back into the rhythm of the story, Invincible Season 2 Part 2 continues to further showcase why it's one of the best, most well-rounded pieces of superhero media at the moment. Now, Part 1 of Season 2 had its fair shares of ups and downs, but Part 2, it is just a constant roller coaster of emotions. Building upon the storylines we set up in Part 1 and picking back up with Mark and just this overabundance of danger on the horizon the minute he returns home. It's truly surreal just how many different problems Mark has to try and juggle in Part 2. Whether it's trying to figure out how to stop an impending Viltrumite invasion, how he can try and save his father from being captured by the Viltrumites, that's all while trying to maintain this stable relationship with Amber and be invincible when he's called upon to be a hero on these various missions. That isn't even everything. That's just a small sprinkling of the things he has to deal with in Part 2, and I understand exactly why he's so stressed out. In essence, the stakes truly have never been this high, and it's reflected well each episode and how it ramps up the blood-soaked tension that gradually gets better each and every episode. I did love all 4 episodes of Part 2, but they got better and better each and every week, mainly due to the fact that the missions that we sprinkle in throughout the 4 episodes are just an absolute blast. In one episode, there's a mission where we take on the Sequids once again that introduces a little bit of creepy body horror, and that's on top of this horrific mission with the Guardians of the Globe. When it comes to the Guardians of the Globe, if you watch my previous reviews on Invincible, you would know I haven't been the biggest fan of the Guardians of the Globe storyline, but I think that is vastly improved in Part 2. Mainly in just the way that this gruesome mission impacts all of them, and the fallout from that allows for a better look into them as characters than we've previously ever seen. For as obnoxious as Rex was beforehand, he ended up being one of my favorite characters by the end of Part 2. Personally though, if I had to pick a favorite segment from these 4 episodes, it probably has to be when Angstrom Levy finally decides to re-enter the picture. I didn't know going in if it was going to be by the end of Season 2 or potentially Season 3 and so on. You gotta remember, I love Invincible, but I've actually not read the source material, so I'm going into this kind of blind. The only thing I found kind of strange about Angstrom Levy in Part 2 is mainly that he's not as large of a focus as I had anticipated. He kind of just randomly decides to pop back into the story while all these other missions are going on. It definitely felt like a very unconventional approach, considering it felt like, to me, he was supposed to be built up as the big bad of Season 2. Even regardless of that unconventional approach, the moment that he re-enters the picture to try and exact revenge on Mark, my jaw was on the floor pretty much the entire episode. The face-off between Angstrom and Mark is the major highlight of Part 2 in my personal opinion, because of the emotional heft, the brutality of it all, and so many spectacular surprises that are sprinkled within it. Had a big effect on me as a viewer. The aftermath of this face-off between Angstrom and Mark has an even bigger effect on him as a character going forward. Several of the different lines of dialogue that Mark says during this battle with Angstrom really got under my skin and gave me goosebumps. Between the final battle in Part 1 where he faced off against the Viltrumites with his father, and then this big battle between him and Angstrom, I think it's safe to say now that Mark Grayson finally is getting a lot stronger as Invincible, which has me excited and also kind of nervous on the future of the show. Nervous because they continuously are introducing stronger and stronger characters that beat the absolute crap out of Mark Grayson. As interesting as it is to see Mark Grayson get the crap beaten out of him in almost every single episode, it still is hard to watch at points. Ever since Invincible started, one of the biggest complaints I usually see a lot of people discuss online and in the comment section is they aren't the biggest fan of Mark and Amber's relationship, which I definitely understand some of the criticisms toward. I agree with some of them actually. But I have to admit, some of the hurdles that are thrown at Mark and Amber in Part 2 really do pull at your heartstrings in terms of emotion throughout these 4 episodes. Rarely, if ever, in any superhero show or movie have I ever seen a relationship explore these type of hurdles as far as trying to make this relationship work, despite the fact that they're always apart from one another because Mark has to go and save somebody or go off-world, and the loneliness being the other person in that relationship that does not have powers. And I think that's a very fascinating thing to explore, the loneliness of being with a superhero. And that's on top of the danger aspect. Mark gets the crap beaten out of him all the time. You never know if he's going to live or die. There's even a big example of that in Part 2 when a Viltrumite woman named Anissa interrupts one of their dates. This woman, she makes quite a first impression. That woman is terrifying. I don't want to give too much much away. I have heard from my friends that have read the book that she's a pretty prominent character that most people will know. And yeah, just in this one appearance you see her in part 2, she makes quite the impression. I am scared to see what she does next time she shows up. There are a ton of amazing surprises in part 2 that I don't want to touch upon too in depth, just because I don't want to spoil them for you. One of them being Alan is back. How is he back? You gotta have to tune in and find out. His return in part 2 is glorious. Then there's developments with Mark's brother. Some of the Omni-Man stuff in part 2 has me really intrigued on where we're going to go with that character leading into season 3. And one of the biggest things that has been speculated upon ever since we got those little teasers early on is the Josh Keaton cameo, which I'm not gonna spoil for you, but I will say I loved his cameo. I think it's gonna be a cameo that fans are going to enjoy, but temper your expectations just because it's not exactly 100% what you expect it's going to be, but it's as close as it could be, I guess, without getting in trouble with the law. It's for sure going to be a big talking point once we get to that finale. But that's where I'm going to leave it for right now. I do plan on doing spoiler reviews as the episodes drop, much like I did for season 1 and part 1 of season 2. So if that's something you're interested in, make sure you stick around for that in the future. Now I've heard my thoughts, though, on season 2, part 2 of Invincible. Share your thoughts down below. How'd you feel about the season? Did you like it? Did you not like it? Did you like part 1 more, or did you like part 2 more? Either way, make sure you share all your thoughts down below, because part of the fun is having that conversation with you guys in the comment section. As always, thank you guys so much for checking out the videos. I always do appreciate it. Make sure you like on the video and also subscribe to the channel so you update reviews, reactions, unboxings, and more. But next time, I'll see you guys later.